They said the throne was empty. They said the king had grown soft, vulnerable, mortal. When Ryan Lochte leaned into that microphone at the London Olympic press conference in 2012, his smile was sharp as broken glass. "Phelps is going to eat dust," he said, and the room erupted. Not with shock, but with hunger. The journalists had been waiting for this moment, for someone to finally say what everyone was thinking. Michael Phelps, the man who had redefined what was possible in water, was about to be dethroned in his own kingdom. The 400-meter individual medley, the race that had made him a legend in Beijing 4 years earlier, was now his guillotine. And Lochte was the executioner, grinning, confident, unburdened by the weight of legacy. Phelps sat there silent. His face betrayed nothing. No anger, no fire, no retort. The cameras zoomed in, desperate for a reaction, for the spark that would ignite the narrative they craved. But Michael gave them nothing. Just a blank stare, the kind that makes you wonder if the man is even listening, or if his mind has already left the room, already slipped into the water where words don't matter. The journalists pressed harder, asking if he felt threatened, if he was worried, if maybe this time the outcome would be different. Still nothing. It was as if Phelps had checked out of his own story, and that absence, that silence, was more unsettling than any trash talk could ever be. London 2012 was supposed to be redemption, the final chapter in the greatest swimming career ever written. But the script had been torn up. Phelps had arrived in London carrying the weight of disappointment, his performances in the early events falling short of the mythic standard he had set for himself. He had already lost races. He had already shown cracks. And now, in the 400 IM, the event that had once been his signature masterpiece, he was facing a younger, hungrier version of himself. Ryan Lochte was 28 years old, at the absolute peak of his powers, a swimmer who had spent years living in Phelps' shadow and was now ready to step into the light. Lochte had won 5 gold medals at the 2011 World Championships. He was the reigning world champion in the 200 and 400 IM. He wasn't just confident, he was right to be confident. The aquatic center was electric on the night of July 28th. The air tasted like chlorine and desperation. This wasn't just a race. It was a coronation or an execution, depending on which side of the pool you were standing. Lochte was in lane 6, Phelps in lane 4. The crowd knew what was at stake. If Phelps lost, the narrative would shift forever. He would no longer be the untouchable god of the pool. He would be the aging champion, the man who stayed too long, who couldn't let go. And Lochte, the trash talker, the brash American with the diamond grill and the swagger, would become the new face of swimming. The buzzer sounded, and immediately everything Lochte had promised started to come true. He exploded off the blocks, his butterfly stroke powerful and rhythmic, cutting through the water like a blade. By the time they hit the 100-meter mark, Lochte was ahead. Not by a touch, but by a body length. Phelps was chasing, his stroke looking labored, uncharacteristic. The commentators' voices rose in disbelief. This is not how the story was supposed to go. Lochte transitioned into backstroke, and the gap held. Phelps clawed back a few tenths of a second, but it wasn't enough. The king was being run over in his own domain, and the world was watching it happen in real time. Do you remember the first time you realized Phelps wasn't invincible? Maybe it was that night. Maybe it was watching Lochte pull away, watching Michael struggle to keep pace, and feeling that sinking realization that even legends have expiration dates. If you're still here because you believe in what Phelps represents, because you've seen him do the impossible before, hit that subscribe button. This story isn't over yet. By the breaststroke leg, Lochte was still in control. He had built a lead that looked insurmountable, nearly a full second ahead at the 300-meter mark. Phelps was fourth. Fourth. The man who had won 14 Olympic gold medals, who had broken 37 world records, was trailing 3 other swimmers with only 100 meters to go. The journalists who had tried to rattle him at that press conference were now scribbling furiously, preparing their obituaries for the greatest career in swimming history. Lochte was going to win. The upset was complete. The throne was his. But here's what no one in that arena understood. Here's what Lochte, in all his confidence and bravado, had miscalculated. Michael Phelps had been training for this exact scenario for 4 years. Not the race itself, but the feeling. The feeling of being behind, of being written off, of having the world count him out. His coach, Bob Bowman, had constructed entire training sessions around worst-case scenarios. They would practice the 400 IM with Phelps starting a body length behind, forcing him to chase, forcing his body to learn how to function in oxygen debt, forcing his mind to stay calm when panic wanted to take over. They called it hypoxic warfare. And while Lochte was out there talking to cameras and basking in his own hype, Phelps was in the pool, alone, training in the dark, preparing for the moment when everything would fall apart. Phelps dove into the freestyle, the final 100 meters. And something shifted. It wasn't visible at first, not in the way Hollywood would script it. There was no sudden burst of speed, no dramatic surge that sent the crowd into hysterics. It was subtler than that, more surgical. Phelps' stroke rate increased, but his efficiency didn't drop. His turnover quickened, but his pull stayed long and powerful. Meanwhile, Lochte, who had been so dominant for 300 meters, began to fade. Not collapse, but fade. His stroke started to shorten. His kick lost its snap. He had been swimming at a pace that was unsustainable, and now in the final 50 meters, his body was sending him the bill. Phelps passed the third-place swimmer at the 350-meter mark. Then he passed the second-place swimmer with 30 meters to go. And then, with 15 meters remaining, he drew even with Lochte. The crowd was on its feet, roaring, the sound so loud it felt like the roof of the aquatic center might lift off. Lochte could see Phelps in his peripheral vision now, could feel the pressure of his presence, the inevitability of what was about to happen. He tried to respond, tried to find another gear, but there was nothing left. His body had been emptied. Phelps, somehow, still had fuel in the tank. The final strokes were almost cruel in their precision. Phelps didn't just catch Lochte. He passed him. Decisively. Emphatically. When Michael Phelps touched the wall, the clock read 4 minutes 9:28 seconds. Lochte finished over 2 seconds behind. 2 seconds. In a 400-meter race, that's an eternity. It's not just a victory. It's a statement. Phelps had taken everything Lochte threw at him, absorbed the trash talk, the early lead, the pressure, and then he dismantled him in the final 100 meters with a closing split that defied logic. Phelps swam the last 100 meters in 55:29 seconds, nearly 2 full seconds faster than Lochte. His heart rate during that final push reached levels that would have caused most elite athletes to shut down. But Phelps had trained his cardiovascular system to operate in conditions that bordered on the superhuman. What Lochte didn't understand, what none of them understood, was that Phelps had already won that race at the press conference. When he sat there in silence, refusing to engage, refusing to give the journalists or Lochte the reaction they wanted, he was already in race mode. His mind had shifted into a place where external noise didn't exist, where the only thing that mattered was the execution of a plan that had been refined over thousands of hours in the pool. Lochte was playing checkers, talking about eating dust, projecting confidence. Phelps was playing chess, already 3 moves ahead, already visualizing the final 50 meters where preparation would trump bravado. This victory put Phelps back on track to becoming the most decorated Olympian in history. It was his 15th Olympic gold medal, and it came at a moment when the world had begun to doubt him, when even his most loyal supporters wondered if maybe this time the magic had run out. But Phelps didn't just win. He dominated. He reminded everyone that greatness isn't about never facing adversity. It's about how you respond when adversity finds you. When the trash talkers get loud, when your back is against the wall, and the easiest thing in the world would be to fold. The science behind what Phelps did in that final 100 meters is staggering. His lactate threshold, the point at which lactic acid begins to flood the muscles and cause fatigue, was significantly higher than the average elite swimmer. But more than that, his mental conditioning allowed him to push through pain that would have forced others to ease off. Studies done on Phelps showed that his body produced less lactic acid than his competitors during maximum effort, and when it did build up, his muscles cleared it more efficiently. But even beyond the physiology, there was something else, something that couldn't be measured in a lab. It was the willingness to suffer more than the person next to you. The ability to convince your body to keep going when every signal is telling you to stop. Ryan Lochte learned a lesson that night that he would carry for the rest of his career. You don't talk trash to a man who has already conquered every demon you can imagine. You don't challenge someone who has spent a lifetime turning doubt into fuel, who has built a career on proving people wrong. Lochte was talented, maybe even as naturally gifted as Phelps in some ways, but talent without the obsessive discipline that defined Phelps' career is just potential. And potential doesn't win Olympic gold medals. Preparation does. Sacrifice does. The countless mornings when no one is watching, when the water is cold and the body is sore, and every rational voice in your head is telling you to take a day off. That's where Olympic champions are made. Not in the press conferences, not in the trash talk, in the work. When Phelps climbed out of the pool that night, his face still showed no emotion. No celebration, no gloating, no acknowledgement of the redemption story that had just played out. He simply nodded, as if confirming to himself that the plan had worked, that the thousands of hours of preparation had been worth it. Lochte, to his credit, was gracious in defeat, shaking Phelps' hand and acknowledging that he had been beaten by a better swimmer on that night. But the look in his eyes told a different story. It was the look of someone who had just realized that there are levels to this game that he hadn't fully comprehended, that talking is easy but backing it up against the greatest of all time is something else entirely. The 400-meter individual medley victory in London didn't just add another gold medal to Phelps' collection. It redefined what it means to be the greatest. Because anyone can dominate when they're at their peak, when confidence is high and the body is fresh. But to come back from disappointment, to absorb the doubt and the criticism and the trash talk, and then to deliver a performance that leaves no room for debate, that's a different level of greatness. That's the kind of greatness that gets written into the Guinness Book of World Records, that gets studied by future generations of athletes trying to understand what separates good from great, great from legendary. If that story moved you, if you felt the weight of that final 100 meters, and the redemption that came with it, show some love and hit that like button. And if you want to keep diving into the moments that made Michael Phelps the most decorated Olympian of all time, subscribe. Because the story of greatness is never just about one race. It's about the obsession, the preparation, and the willingness to prove yourself over and over again when the world thinks you're done. Michael Phelps didn't just beat Ryan Lochte that night in London. He beat every doubt that had been whispered, every headline that had suggested his time was up, every voice that said maybe the legend had run its course. He proved that the throne doesn't belong to the loudest voice or the flashiest personality. It belongs to the one who shows up every single day, who trains when no one is watching, who prepares for the worst, and then executes when the lights are brightest. That's not talent. That's not luck. That's obsession. And obsession, when channeled correctly, when backed by discipline and preparation and an unshakable belief in the process, is what separates the great from the untouchable. Phelps ate dust for 300 meters that night, and then he made Lochte choke on it for the final 100. That's not just a victory. That's a masterclass in what it means to be the greatest of all time.